The last half-century has been incredibly eventful for humanity. The advent of FTL, as well as meeting the rest of the spacefaring species of the galaxy, and such a number of them, had effectively flipped humanity from a lonely world with a single lunar outpost into a proper interstellar civilization. What humanity hadn't anticipated, nor the rest of the galactic community, was the sheer scale of biological difference between a human and what was considered baseline in a wider galaxy. Every species was unique, yes, but in this case...
They're rapid breeders, stupidly fast. Their fertility cycle has them several times in a single year, and they're able to have multiple children per pregnancy naturally.
Kershaw, a rather slender ceramite, was explaining to her co-conspirator.
Wait, so one human can have 2 children a year? They've got to have a long maturation period, right?
Darwin, the stockier of the two, asked.
Not in the slightest. Their cultures have them reproducing at 16 to 18 years, but they can do younger than that,
she answered, with a disbelieving shake of her head.
So in the span of 20 years, you've got... hang on.
She raised a slender hand up to tap at the side of her head, activating the small computer affixed to the side of her head. A brief flash of light scored across her eyes, a quick series of glances, and she came up with the number.
27 pregnancies?
She exclaimed in shock.
27?
Darwin nearly spat.
And they can have 2 kids each? Naturally? 20 years old and I was still playing with blocks. My mum was considering a sibling.
Most don't have multiple at a time,
Kershaw recovered.
It's an exception, but even then, that number assumes they're trying to get pregnant all the time.
The 2 ceramites were currently making their way down the brightly lit sidewalk of their little slice of the station. The fact that ceramites had a lifespan in centuries meant that most long-term orbital habitats were made with comfort and room in mind, providing an abundance of space for one to roam and flourish. Plants featured prominently, both as a means of recycling atmosphere and to provide a means of distraction. Long walks through the thick vegetation were a source of comfort to many, and many festivals and ceremonies were held in the spacious gardens. They weren't the only inhabitants of the station, far from it, but the ceramite influences shone throughout. Gentle curves, an abundance of murals and paintings, all of them pointing to long-term habitation on the order of centuries. The other species aboard, with lifespans to match, held similar values and hobbies. Seeing their living space flourish over decades of labour was a source of comfort for those living there, especially as the elders taught lessons among the benches and seats scattered throughout. Kershaw savoured the brief moment of tranquility before taking a turn, the distant chatting of the people enjoying the public space, serving to mask their conversation.
So,
Darwin eventually said, giving a furtive glance over his shoulder in what had to be the most conspicuous fashion imaginable.
They're mating like Pio, living short little lives, barely a couple centuries long at most. That's where flicker lives comes from, I take it?
Exactly.
Kershaw's amusement was clear as she led the way out of that public space and towards one of the many maintenance corridors that catacombed the station. As elegant and refined as the ceramite technology was, they had to abide by the rules of physics, which meant that the large inhabited sections required a great deal of behind-the-scenes maintenance. Air filtration, water and nutrient recycling, and a dizzying array of processing, fabrication and monitoring machines. Fat conduits channeled power and data in every direction, dim lights providing ample illumination to the ceramite eyes.
That's not the important part, though,
Darwin prompted, a bit of excitement creeping into his features.
I mean, the biology is the whole point of it, really, but that's what you're on about, isn't it? Their lives are so short, it's kind of just natural that they have lots of children, so they don't really question when people go missing.
Now they neared the more sensitive nature of it. Kershaw led the way along the comparatively tight corridors, fighting the claustrophobia inherent to all ceramites. Confined spaces were unnatural, which is why they left areas like this to other species, or, preferably, servitor machines. She paid no heed to several gently humming drones that passed by on their walk, taking a breath of hot, humid air as they emerged from the corridor into one of the numerous fabrication bays littered across the station. She gave a soft wave of the hand to a doorway ahead, her personal device wirelessly syncing to the local systems. She was a mid-level administrator on the station, allowing her no shortage of latitude when it came to interfacing with the background workings, such as, in this case, requisitioning the workshop and attached storage areas. The space opened up to reveal inner workings that would be familiar to any ceramite, up to a point. Huge omnifabs worked to churn out an endless array of products, both major and minor, from mundane consumer goods to replacement parts. The bulky machines roared angrily as the assorted welders and manipulators worked to create a continuous symphony of noise. Fed by conveyor belts, an abundance of floor space had been made to provide storage room for various maintenance drones and countless shelves of toolboxes and parts. It was a rare day someone chose to come here willingly.
Precisely, she continued. So when the Syrian cartel discovered that humans were basically little factories of complex hormones and enzymes, with glands that specifically secrete them in bulk, well, suddenly they got interested. Very interested. They did a deep dive on actually studying humans, seeing what they're actually made of. A full analysis suddenly finds all sorts of interesting things. Humans have glands that produce adrenaline, brains that work as high-efficiency processors, and a wide variety more than that. The Syrians went to work capitalizing on that, stomping down the humans and making their homeworld basically one big research lab.
Darwin checked to make sure the door was shut behind them, briefly wincing at the noise of the machinery. He raised his voice to be heard. So, what's that mean for us? The Syrians are getting their snouts beat in with that occupation, even if they're keeping the details of it secret.
It means we've got a lot of research to work off of, thanks to our friends. And the market for those goods is hot because of all the difficulties they're having, which brings us right here.
They had reached the secluded yet still rather spacious hidden chamber within the larger fabrication facility. Its smooth titanium walls were far newer than the rest of the structure, their aseptically clean veneer hinting to the activities within. Once inside, the heavy rumbling and rattling of the heavy machinery was turned into a muted hum. Bright lights illuminated the stainless metal flooring, the walls adorned in an array of screens and displays that flashed through reams of data. The center of the room was dominated by two long rows, scores of coffin-sized rectangles sitting neatly arrayed, both atop and beside each other. Uniformly sized and designed, their smooth metallic surfaces were only broken by an assortment of matching cables. Each cask mirrored to the next, unidentifiable except to the automated drones tending to them.
148 units, she declared. There were a bit over 200 when they raided the outpost, but losses were incurred, both in procurement and initial processing.
Darwin gave an appreciative hum. That's quite a lot of product. He looked from cask to cask, noting their uniformity, as well as the fact that each one held no storage of potential wealth.
That can become quite a bit more. The Syrians provided us with the means for artificial reproduction. Within a century, this group could serve as the seed for upwards of 1,000.
Kirsch's greed was unmasked.
Each one serving as a complex biological factory. The real losses come from the neural resoc. Their brains can react poorly to the conversion.
Darwin gave a sidelong glance at that. Poorly? The two of them made their way down that central avenue formed by the casks.
Brain deaf, which isn't entirely a loss, given their organs still function, but having their brains functional adds a great deal of value, which, I think, will be of great interest to both of us.
Darwin paused in front of one of the casks, looking behind it to the display monitor. The various outputs from just the one were having some very dizzying numbers floating through his head. Adrenaline, sold at pictogram prices, was produced in nanogram quantities. It was little wonder the Syrians were so vested when the humans in this room alone could fund his purchase of a small interstellar-capable freighter in a day's output. I can hide them and move the product, he offered, but we'll need to agree on terms. I know you're a middleman in this, but if I'm to be moving bulk, I'll be taking on risk of my own. You're sure the humans won't take notice of so many people being taken away?
200 in a species of billions? Taken from some fringe colony while they're preoccupied with their homeworld?
Kirsche scoffed openly.
It'll be like taking notice of the loss of the petal of a flower in an entire bed of roses.
Darwin mulled the notion over. Billions of humans seemed an exaggeration in the extreme, but if their breeding rate was so extraordinary, he could see perhaps 500 million. Even that was on the upper bounds, given how short-lived they were, but he was somewhat mollified by the prospect that this was a colony taken wholesale.
Fine. I'll take them.
Kirsche smiled widely, an almost sickly sweet expression on her features. Completely and utterly oblivious of the whirlwind they were about to reap.